For a majority of gamers in the 90s, there was a competition to see who was the #1 video game organization in the world that was duking it out. Nintendo versus Sega. It was the go-to topic amongst gamers who were either Team Red or Team Blue. Sega and Nintendo would be head-to-head until the mid-90s when a new player would emerge in the form of the PlayStation 1. Both companies did everything they could to get your bottom dollar no matter what, and Sega would then release various revisions of the Genesis with the Model 2, and then years later would sell the license off to Majesco to release the Genesis 3. But in between the release of the Model 2 and 3, Sega would later release a system that would combine one of their latest peripherals into one easy package that would become an expensive investment. On this edition of The Uncommon Valley, we take a look at the failed release of Sega's Frankenstein monster, the Sega CDX. By the early 90s, CDs were making significant headway as a storage medium for music and movies. Video games would also get into the fray, with NEC doing it for their CD platform for the PC Engine CD-ROM, then later released as the TurboGrafx CD. Later that year, Nintendo announced a partnership with Sony to develop its own CD peripheral for the SNES, and we all know the story behind that. While Sega was definitely interested in the idea of doing CD technology, and shortly after the release of the Genesis, Tomio Takami was tasked with creating a CD add-on which would later become the Sega CD. Originally intended to equal the capabilities of the TurboGrafx CD, but with twice as much RAM in it. Takami's team planned the device to feature hardware scaling and rotation similar to that of the Sega arcade games, which required a dedicated digital signal processor. However, two changes made later in the development contributed to the final unit's higher than expected price. Because the Genesis and its CPU was too slow to handle the Sega CD new graphical capabilities, an additional 68,000 CPU was incorporated in the final production. It was later released in 1991 in Japan and then a year later in the US, and would later retail for around $399 US. At the time, it was an expensive investment, but Sega believed that it was necessary to show that while expensive was technology to sell, that people would be interested in investing into something that was expensive as an attraction. And of course, the system was bundled with a copy of the FMV game Sewer Shard. Though some people were mixed about it, the game itself did actually bring intrigue into the fray, as FMV gaming was the new hot ticket item. So there is a bit of information on the Sega CD, a little bit quick, I would honestly say, but we're not talking about that, as we are talking about the Frankenstein console that is the Sega CDX. Though while this system wasn't really thought too much of, it was a last-ditch effort by Sega to bring intrigue into the Sega CD front before they started to bring more interest into their other CD platform, the Sega Saturn. So a lot of people are pretty much curious. Why does this look like a Walkman, and why exactly did this not bring intrigue into the CD platform when it was doomed to fail? Well, the answer is all over the place, but as usual, I will cover over it. And to start things off, we have to talk about its release day. Released in April 1994, right on side with the JVC XI in North America under the name Sega CDX, retailed for around $399 US. a portable CD player that both played Genesis and Sega CD games, as well as audio CDs and CDG discs. Resembling a slightly longer version of the typical portable CD player at the time, most consoles had to hook up to the system to be able to project any video on it, but the CDX did the exact opposite, and it was its own standalone console. Unlike the Sega CD, its compact size and addition of the headphone port enabled it to be played with audio discs on the move. Unless the high-end batteries such as lithium were used in the system, it would drain the batteries fairly quickly within a matter of under an hour. The unit featured front-mounted CD control buttons as well as a backlit LCD screen to display the track number. However, games could only be played with a power cable by its main CPU and connected to a television, unlike the portable Sega Nomad. So it's interesting to see that Sega did tinker with the idea of doing Walkman players in general, but that wasn't really the big problem of why this system initially failed at launch and why a lot of people don't know about this console's existence. By the release of 1994, disc systems were getting pretty expensive, and $400 was a big, hefty investment. While Sega CD's library does consist of FMV quality video content, some games that do feature this option had problems constantly from freezing and lockup issues during heavy sessions. Despite the lack of Sega's approval, the 32X is compatible with the CDX if properly connected. With there being too many console revisions and the price being too expensive, only around 5,000 units were sold in North America. The sad thing is, it was just cheaper to actually get a Model 2 system and, of course, the Model 2 CD unit for about half the price. People were just not interested in investing in a $400 system that sadly would get later reduced to $100 or less. Even the rebate that they would offer was not enough to bring interest. And this unfortunately wasn't good because most people were holding off for other systems, namely the 32X. The 32X ended up getting the most amount of advertisement up until the Sega Saturn. While both systems did initially fail, it did bring more interest in those systems as opposed to the CDX. CDX was advertised in a couple of magazines for GamePro and Electronic Gamer magazine, strangely both with the issue number 57 number. They both featured the same Sega CDX advert, and then on the GamePro side, they actually did put a column in where they talked about new Sega hardware and accessories that were coming out. Same with the JVC XI. So what do I personally think about the system? Well, honestly, at the time of this video, it's a lot more expensive, and honestly, I didn't really think too much on it. I was just thinking about convenience over an expensive piece of tech. Because, quite honestly, this is about the best way to play Sega games on it. As for comparison's sake, audio that comes out of this system is among some of the most top-notch of retro consoles that are out there. Now, while I do think that the system is very expensive to collect for nowadays, it is still very neat to be able to get this as your own console to be able to play both CD and cartridge games. And yes, you can still technically play 32X games, but is it good enough for you to invest in? Simply put, no. Kind of a running theme with this show, but the biggest answer to it is that you would be better off getting a modded CD unit to be able to play imports, and of course a Genesis Model 2 to be able to play all of your other games. It's just way cheaper to get those two together still than it is just to get this out of the box. Out of the box, you could literally get a brand new CDX back in 1994 for the same price you could get for this system. And of course, Analog has been releasing more Genesis variants as of late, and honestly, I would just wait until they get restocks of those in. So, that is pretty much the history of the CDX. Too expensive and too ambitious at the time. Only other company to do something like that would be Turbo, but we will, of course, look into that at a later date. But that is, of course, all the time that we have for this edition of the Uncommon Valley. Thank you for watching as we look to the past into the present.